Good morning.
Morning.
I don't usually title my sermons, but if this one had a title, it would be Resting in God. So my goal this morning is to put you all to sleep. Which is a great goal, because that way, if you fall asleep during the sermon, for me it's a win rather than failure or something. So yes, right? We're going to have communion after the sermon, and if during communion time it's just me up here and the rest of you are snoring away in your pews, completely fine with that. I'm guessing Cecily is still going to be awake, but the rest of you are free to sleep. So, Revelation, right? Revelation starts out with this scene before the throne of God, and the people are singing, and the choir is there, and, right? I don't know if you, right? So we tried to sing, you know, like this one of these great hallelujah songs, and you know, I don't know if you heard, you know, something you've sung before in the background, blessing and honor, glory and power be unto him, right? Or something like that. Right? There's all these songs that come out of this because there's this scene of this great, huge multitude standing and sitting around the throne of God and singing. And the person who's watching all of this in this vision says to one of the elders, well, who are all of these people? Because they're like from all different tribes and nations. And the elder says, well, they're the people who came out of the great ordeal. And people have wondered ever since John wrote this, so which great ordeal? The great ordeal. Is it some event in the past that was the great ordeal, or something we should really be worried about because there's some sort of great ordeal coming? There's no way to know this. This morning then, we want to think about the great ordeal as life. Because there are times when life is a great ordeal. And there are certainly people we know for whom life is a great ordeal. There are people who are born in pain and who live their lives in pain and die in pain. There are people born into horrible circumstances who never recover. There are children who die very early. There are children who die as children. There are parents who die when their children are young. The list can just go on and on. Life can be a great ordeal. So in that sense, right, the end of life moves us to a time of resting in God. That finally, the great ordeal, life, is over. And we can rest in God. In a lot of ways, in some ways, in all ways, it's tougher to survive. Those who have died are dead. They are no longer suffering. And yet, here we are, still in the great ordeal. And now, right, if someone has died, that's another death we have to deal with. It's another piece of pain added to the pain of our lives. Surviving is hard. Surviving is also a great ordeal. So I invite those of us who are surviving also to rest in God. We don't have to wait until we die to rest in God. We can do that now. The psalm we read paints a much rosier picture of things. A much more optimistic picture, right? Over and over and over again. Right? I sought the Lord, and He answered me and delivered me from all my fears. This poor soul cried and was heard by the Lord and was saved from every trouble. Oh, fear the Lord, you His holy ones, for those who fear Him have no want. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Which is a huge statement of faith, but some days doesn't feel very realistic. Because just doesn't feel right. So somehow there's this balance. There's this balance between our faith and our hope and our trust in God and the reality of pain and sickness and death, trial and tribulation of the great ordeal that is life. Somehow we live in between those things. And we have to, because at some point we have to deal with the reality of death. We are not going to be saved from every trouble. No matter how rosy our lives are, at some point they're going to end. Sort of the one great guaranteed thing. But we also proclaim this hope beyond death, which is tricky. I know some of you would really prefer if I could give you a formula for life after death so you can plug it into your calculation of life. And I'm not going to. Not that I don't have one, right? But I'm just not going to give it to you because, you got to get ordained first to get the formula. But still, right, we need to remember that we live in the ongoing presence of God. My assumption is that if we live in the ongoing presence of God, that God does not abandon us at death. That wouldn't be a God worth worshiping. I'm going to keep worshiping. But the ongoing presence of God is important in all of this. It's not like, well, someday we're going to die and then finally we're going to get to rest in God. Or finally we're going to experience the love of God. That hopefully the love of God we experience after death is merely a continuation of the love of God we've experienced all the way through life. Some days it's been harder to find than others, but hopefully regularly enough during our lives, we've been able to rest in God so that when death comes, it will just be a continuation of the same rest. So 1 John reminds us, beloved, we are God's children now. Isn't that a wonderful idea? Beloved, we are God's children now. And what we will be, John goes on to say, has not yet been revealed. So, what's coming, we don't know. And what things look like after death, the Bible gives us all sorts of visions and ideas and things like that, but really John says, seriously, we don't know. But we rest in God. And there are things that have been revealed, and there are things that remain hidden and will remain hidden. So there's always mystery. And there's also lots of times in our lives when we really don't want mystery. What we want is miracle. We don't want the mystery of death. We don't want the mystery of suffering. We don't want to stand before the mystery of God and say, oh yeah, whatever. What we want to do is stand before the mystery of God and say, okay, God, now this person needs healing. I'm tired of this. Right? Because don't you? Right? It's like you stand before these people who are suffering, and you, God, I'm really tired of this. Can't you just do something? Of course we want miracle. And sometimes we get it. Not always the way we want, but even then, sometimes. Right? But always we get mystery. Always we get those two things at the same time, the mystery and the miracle. So, we continue to rest in God. And I invite you to continue throughout this week and throughout this year to continue to rest in God. Part of the reason we can rest in God is because God provides for us. And God provides friends, and God provides community, and God provides support. And somehow God seems to come through when we need it. So I invite you to come forward this morning and join me in communion, where we celebrate the fact that God provides for us. And we have a little, we have some bread and some juice as a reminder of God's ongoing provision in our lives. We practice open communion here, which means that if you're not sure you're welcome, yes, you are. So I invite you to come forward.